Looking for a place to speak your truth? This podcast is on an endless pursuit to build through entrepreneurship, empowerment, and creativity. Through thought-provoking content and a fearlessness to dive into untouched topics with an undeniable dedication to highlighting others who are often overlooked. This is Deep Conversations.
Stay tuned for Deep Conversation Podcast.
Welcome to Deep Conversations Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Ryan Stewart, and today I am blessed to have the president and CEO of the 1890s Universities Foundation, Mrs. Jewel Bronaugh.
Yes, you did good, Bronaugh, but I'm going to give you an A. Yes, that was great.
Okay, Bronaugh, yes, and I appreciate you jumping on this podcast with me. This is a wonderful opportunity to network and do some things up here in the north and down south. But first, before we start, can you talk about the 1890 land grant universities and exactly what are those?
Yes, Ryan, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It is really an honor and a privilege to be a part of this podcast.
Thank you.
And I'm saying officially hello to all of your listeners, all of your viewers. It gives me a great opportunity to talk about something I am extremely passionate about, which is our 1890 land grant institutions. These institutions are really the top publicly funded research, teaching, and extension outreach HBCUs in the country. There are 19 of these wonderful universities in 18 southern states. And if I could talk a little bit more about them, so you have to give honor to like Howard University and Shaw University.
Mm-hmm.
Like Shaw University was the first Black college organized after the Civil War so that Black folks could earn a college degree.
Mm-hmm.
But these 1890 institutions are titled because of the way they were established. They, first of all, are HBCUs that are state and federally funded. So they have that support. And they're titled because of the legislation they were founded on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you would just allow me, I gotta give a little history because people need to understand how land grant institutions came about. So I have to take everybody back to 1862.
Mm-hmm.
It's way back in the day. If you can imagine, back then we were an agrarian society. We were mostly a society of rural farmers in this country. We were in the midst of the Civil War. And you think about rural citizens, poor rural citizens who may have wanted to go to college. I mean, could they really afford to go to Howard or Yale University? Absolutely not. A senator from Vermont, his name is Justin Morrill. He proposed to Congress that, why don't we provide an opportunity for regular rural folks to go to college?
Mm-hmm.
And he proposed the idea of providing land or granting land or perpetual endowments to states to create these publicly funded institutions so common men and women could go to college, right? He wanted all to be able to get a college education. And he said, especially the men and women of toil. So those are folks that use their hands.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think back in 1862, Black people were still enslaved. So we were not considered the all people that were being referenced in 1862 when these land grants were established. And this was pretty, phenomenal to do this, because when you think about the safe and abundant food that we have now, it's really because of the research that's done at land grant institutions. But in 1890, he proposed a second act to Congress, and it was to establish another set of land grant institutions so that Blacks could get a college degree. We were freed by that time. And, the white institutions, the 1862s, wouldn't let us in there.
Mm-hmm.
So states were offered an opportunity to either allow Blacks to go to the 1862 land grants or establish a second one. And all of the southern states said, we'll just establish a second set. And there you have the 1890 land grant institutions. We call them the 19 strong.
Yeah. Now you being from Virginia, and you received your bachelor's degree from James Madison University, I read.
Yes.
And you got your PhD at Virginia Tech University. So you've been in the mix of this for some time. So why why should we care about these institutions, and why are they so important and critical to our communities?
That is such a great question. Again, first of all, these 1890 institutions, publicly funded, right, for everyday people to go to college, for Black people to get a college degree. I mean, that's what they were founded on. They are so important, and I can tell a personal story. You mentioned my degrees from James Madison University and Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is Virginia's 1862 predominantly white land grant institution, but it was Virginia State University, which is Virginia's 1890 land grant, that gave me an opportunity to become a leader. I do not know if there would be any other institution when I came in working on the bottom floor of my building as an extension specialist, a 4-H extension specialist, if they would have seen something in me to give me an opportunity to become a leader, to become a dean at that college, and to just support me in my career advancement. That's a different touch point for these 1890 HBCUs. For me, it's a different personal story. I didn't get my degrees from there, but I became a leader there. But these institutions enroll about 117,000 students every year. 57% of the students receive Pell Grants. Those are the grants for, the poorest of families. So 57% of the student body receives Pell Grants, and they produce over 33,000 degrees every year. And they're uniquely focused on agriculture, mechanical arts, which we know is engineering, family consumer sciences, things like housing and food safety, food science, nurses. They produce the largest number of nurses, teachers. And every 1890 land grant has a military preparation program because, we were at war when these institutions were founded. So this system is powerful, the premier system of universities that cares about research that impacts Black people, that cares about the outreach to get that research on the ground. Tuskegee University graduates 70% of all Black veterinarians in this country. So they're uniquely focused on specific areas of study. They care about issues that Black people and people of color in our communities care about. They do the research that's critical to our health, our environment, and they make a significant economic contribution, $5 billion in economic activity to this nation every year, creating about 41,000 jobs every year. So there's that economic give back. So there's the investment in our students, the investment in our communities, and the investment to our economy that you cannot be denied.
So now your organization, it supports these institutions. And can you tell us about your mission and why the foundation was created?
We're a fairly new foundation. I don't want to say we're brand new. We're about 7 years old. When you think about foundations, that's not very old, but back in 2015, we were celebrating the 125th anniversary of the Morrill Act, that act to establish the 1890 institution. And on the heels of that big celebration, everybody was celebrating then, the original president of the foundation, Dr. Mortimer Newell, he's the first president. He just retired in December. He and a group of forward-thinking folks were trying to figure out, you've got these 19 universities, they were 19 then, and how do we kind of catalyze all of the expertise of all of these institutions and speak about them in one voice? Because each institution has its own strengths, but it's hard, when you're trying to get someone to invest or someone to go, like talking about each one of them individually. And so they had a thought of how they could form a foundation that would really provide that support of that 3-part mission of teaching, research, and extension, to help them form partnerships, to find resources to support the tripartite or 3-part mission, to help them collaborate in a more effective way, so that they could provide those meaningful solutions that communities need, that people need, that students need, and they form the foundation. And that's indeed part of what we do. We really try to work with the 1890 institutions to see how we can develop financial resources, grants, private funds, other partnership opportunities, scholarships for students, how we support Black farmers and farmers of color. That's what we do as a foundation. So a lot of my job is resource development. I've had to become very quickly a fundraiser, so to speak, because the work that these institutions, the research that they lead and the things that they focus on, they need resources. They get state and federal funds, but more is needed to really do that special work that really helps make that change. So that's kind of the mission of what we do, and that's a lot of the work that I do.
So, how critical would you say is the support role that you play? Because I would say, when you're dealing with a lot of these Black colleges, again, in our communities, we need help that a lot of times we don't get everywhere else. So how would you say that support role is that you play? How critical is that?
Well, it's extremely critical when you think about the issues that are pervasive in the Black community. You think about the health disparities. You think about just finding safe and affordable food, issues around food security and hunger. You think about trying to prepare our young people to go into the workforce of today and tomorrow. You think about making sure that communities have safe and affordable food supplies, that farmers can have livelihoods and can be effective, that you can support rural economies and Black economies and people of color. The 1890s focus our research and our work in those spaces. That's what we do. And so who's going to really focus on the research that's needed to address these issues and then go out in these communities and share the solutions, the research-based solutions to some of these problems? It's our HBCUs, and our 1890s are specifically missioned to do this work. Virginia State University, my home university, sits in the city of Petersburg, an underserved city. A lot of the issues that are really prevalent in the city of Petersburg, and you could replicate this in all the 18 states that these institutions are in, they have critical problems, and who cares about them? It's Virginia State University that cares about them, right? So I think it's really important that we really leverage the work that these universities do. And we want to continue to pay forward with that work by creating the next generation of our future leaders and our future members of our workforce who we see them as great minds. We just try to cultivate that, and so they can carry all of that great work going forward so we can see some lasting change in our communities.
So if you could give us some insights on your background, what qualified you for this role? Now you primarily come out of the government, and what was it, agriculture, the Department of Agriculture?
Yes.
Yeah.
USDA.
And now you've entered the nonprofit sector. So it's important in so many ways. So I guess can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. It's a great question. When I was interviewed for this job, and they'll ask you, why should we hire you?
Yeah.
And I said, I am perfect for this job. I grew up in the backyard of an 1890 land grant institution. My mother taught at one. We're on the campus going to the football games and the gym jams and all the stuff I literally grew up on it in the 1890 institution, right? I started my career in agriculture in 2001 when I came to Virginia State University as a 4-H youth development specialist. I mentioned that earlier. I don't know how many people know of 4-H, Head, Heart, Health, and Hands, Make the Best Better. It's one of the largest youth organizations in the world, but I started my career there. So I started in extension in the College of Agriculture. So I really started my agriculture career in higher education at an 1890 institution. Again, I told you they gave me an opportunity to become a leader. So I worked my way up from that job to becoming the dean of the College of Agriculture at Virginia State. And again, I didn't have a lot of experience. They fed into me and they picked me up when I fell down, and they kind of showed me how to become a leader, and they supported me so much so that my next step from there was the first Black female state of Virginia agriculture commissioner. And so then I got a broader picture of kind of agriculture from a state perspective, but I brought that 1890 land grant training with me. And then that allowed me to get noted for the role at USDA, where I was the first Black deputy secretary in the whole history of USDA. So I've kind of taken that local to the state, to the federal with my viewpoint, but the passion of the 1890 going with me along the way. And so I understand this community of 1890, right? But now I'm just taking all that passion to a foundation where I can really speak about them from multiple levels. So I feel like I'm the person right now who is meant to be in this job, and it's certainly a pinnacle of my career. I can say that much. I bring all that enthusiasm and what knowledge I have, and my partners and folks I've connected with along the way with me, to try to use my experience to bring as many resources and as much notoriety to these 1890 institutions as I can do.
Now, through all of this, all of the things that you've been, all of the accomplishments that you have, what's one thing that you could say that you learned about yourself?
To be yourself. And I think I learned that most. You always hear people say, just be yourself, and you don't quite understand what it means, but it literally means being okay with who you are. I learned that when I went to USDA and I was on a very high platform where people were looking at me, and I wasn't necessarily comfortable in that space. But once I got comfortable with being okay in my own skin, the type of leader that I was, bringing all of my experiences with me, including, growing up in a Black community, having that experience at Virginia State University, and even at Virginia Tech, just being comfortable with who I was, that's when I became a better leader.
Yes.
So, now I'm just more comfortable in my own skin, and I work with young people all the time, and I'm like, look, you be comfortable being unapologetically you. That's what's most important.
Yeah, it's so there's a lot of discussion going on about the lack of funding with these schools. Can you talk about that issue a little bit?
Yes, that lack of funding you've been hearing a lot about. I would just say in one statement is to the tune of about $2.1 billion of loss in the last 30 years.
Goodness.
It was highlighted. It's been a discussion, but a frustrating one for the 1890s. I think what has brought some attention to it was late summer, early fall. The Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of Education, Secretary Cardona, Secretary Vilsack, sent letters to the governors of the southern states where the 1890s live. And they highlighted for each state the funding inequity that had occurred over the past 30 years. And the 2.1 billion is how much all of the funding inequity added up to. And it kind of, so to speak, it put them on blast.
Yeah.
And got everyone's attention focused on this. And so that's kind of where the discussion started. And that's where people began to think about their own states and the challenges that they were having in those states. If you look at state matching data, and first of all, if I could back up, the way that these the land grant institutions were established in the 1890s were established is, for the 1890s, every federal dollar that the United States Department of Agriculture, through the National Institute of Food and Ag, that's how the funding comes to these institutions. For every federal dollar, the language upon which they were established said the state had to provide a matching dollar. Now let's just think about it. The 1862 institutions weren't established with that formula in place. They were established with perpetual endowments.
Yeah.
We know those pay forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
The 1890s were established in essence with cash. And if you can't invest that cash, you gotta, who has a cash to invest long enough in an endowment to live off the money that you make, right? So they immediately were set up with a disparity in the funding formulas that they were established on. But with that challenge of getting that state match, now the onus is on the state to provide that dollar that matches the federal dollar. And in essence, if you don't get the state dollar, you're not supposed to get the federal dollar. Okay, now they have processes that will allow states who didn't get their match to still get some federal money, but there were no guardrails around holding the states accountable when this was established. So some states provided the match, some didn't. Some provided more regularly, others don't. So you saw over the years disparities in getting that state match. So, for example, if you go back over 5 years, in 2018, 8 of the 19 universities got their state match.
Wow.
2019, 7 of the 19. 2020, 8 of the 19. You see the trend. In 2021, 7 of the 19. So, there were universities who for years had not obtained their state match. Some did well, some didn't do as well. And so it added up to millions of dollars in loss to these universities. And people are like, well, what's the big deal? The big deal is the loss of funding, but it's a big deal because there are years of missed opportunity. It's like the funding that you never got. How much better could you be if you could have gotten money to invest in your infrastructure to have top-notch buildings on your campus and your research capabilities and thinking about what you could do with your students and your faculty and other stakeholders who relied on you. The universities, they get the most money, get the best faculty, and they have first class everything. How many students didn't get a scholarship and couldn't go to college?
Yeah.
So, you think about all of these lost opportunities and how much further the 1890s could be in research, in the capacity that we have, and even having our own endowment assets. The 1862s in the Southern region have about $45 billion in endowments, whereas all the 1890s together add up to about maybe, 1 billion. So, I mean, it's just a lot of lost opportunity for significant growth that has impacted a lot of people.
So what can we do? What can we do as a community to help to kind of put pressure on these policyholders or policymakers, I should say?
Yeah, what you're doing today, having that platform for people to even understand why this is an issue and how it came about is significant. Advocacy is very, very important. First of all, we have some federal legislators who really focus on our agricultural work at the federal level. You think of Senator Raphael Warnock in Georgia. He's on the Senate Ag Committee. Sherrod Brown from Ohio. He's another one. Representative David Scott from Georgia. These are folks at the federal level who are really trying to think about Farm Bill funding. That's the funding that funds all of the stuff we're talking about to make sure it's there. But you need those key stakeholders at the state level. And I mentioned the state that I come from, Virginia. We have been a little bit more successful than some other states because we had some advocates in our General Assembly who believed and graduated from 1890s. And now that we have numbers that show the loss, there's power in people being able to write letters to your legislature, to your governor saying, hey, Delaware State is a very important university, and here's the contribution that Delaware State makes to this local economy, and here are the number of students who graduate. You need to make sure that they get that state match because they're making a contribution to the state of Delaware. Our legislative Black caucuses in the various states have also been staunch advocates on this. If you can reach out to them and get them to continue to educate and put that pressure on the state legislators and on the governor to prioritize this, I think it could be helpful. But here's another thing, you got to make sure that the state budget is set up to even get this match. See, it's this tricks to all this stuff. You know, when you don't know what to ask for. How do you even set up a line item in the state budget so that it identifies the matching funds? You have to make sure that the budget is set up correctly. So those are some other small pieces that folks who can make these changes, legislators and others, that they know what to ask for in order to receive that state match. So working with key advocates is really important. And again, the letter writing, the visits with advocates to say, hey, here's what we expect. Here's why this is important to our community, to our organization, to our neighborhoods. We need this to happen because this is an investment that is valuable to this state. I think it's really, really important in making changes because we're seeing that work. In the state of Maryland, you know, they have Governor Wes Moore. He's the first Black governor for the state of Maryland. He saw how important this was, along with the Maryland Black Caucus. And he not only said, we're going to get the match for the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, but we're going to provide $5 million in parity funding, funding to try to address some of the lack of funding that happened for the last 30 years. It sets a great precedence for states to follow about what you can do, what governors can do, what legislative Black caucuses can do to try to make sure that these institutions are fully funded and that they're very strong.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important. I think it's a little bit unfortunate because I think a lot of people in our community, we don't know about things like this. You know what I mean? And when we don't know, for example, you know, the importance of voting and things like that, it's what we're primarily used to is just vote for the president or vote for the vice president, but everybody underneath those are the main players, and those are the things that you guys are dealing with now. You know, so that's something that I think this conversation is necessary to have because this generation coming up, I think they need to get an understanding of the importance of these things and to help out. And because this stuff isn't talked about on television and all this you know, all this stuff. It's usually we unfortunately got to dig our feet deeper into the dirt to get through a lot of stuff. And I want to commend you for all the work that you've been doing because, I mean, it's showing and it's working. You know, it's a lot of these things are working, and I know sometimes it gets difficult, but you're doing a really good job. I was reading a lot about you, you know, in your biography, and you're doing some things that's going a long ways.
I appreciate that. And that's because people invested in me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the pay forward. We've all had someone who believed in us.
Yeah.
When we still didn't look all that shiny, and we didn't seem all that great, but they saw something in us, and I feel like that's my job. But again, Ryan, you're creating a platform with your podcast to talk about these things, and I mean, talk about the voting thing for everyone that tunes in. That presidential election is critical, but the local opportunities to vote, the state opportunities, you really want to get those folks at those levels in place who are supporting what we believe in, because that's where a lot of the change happens. You know, you vote for the president every 4 years, but you're having these interim elections throughout. And it's the states they're making all these wild decisions anyway. So you better make sure that you vote at the local levels and vote for the president, because you got to get the right people in place below the president to even make the positive changes that we need before they even get to the federal level. And it starts with your local leaders. So, you know, you have to vote every election, every time you get a chance, because no vote is a vote for the opposing party.
Yeah, and I can say that I was, you know, just coming up. I'll be 40 soon, but I didn't learn none of this stuff about the local governors and all this stuff. As you're growing up, it's just all you know is just the president and the vice president. But as you get older and you start dealing with different things, and that's why I think this generation needs to, we got to kind of lay the foundation for them, because nobody's going to do it for them. It's, and sometimes, unfortunately, now the way things are going, it's going to be harder for them to realize some things because there's so many distractions everywhere. You know what I mean? So I just think it's necessary. And getting back to it, all with all the things going on in terms of the threats to DEI, what an affirmative action is the future bright for these institutions?
That's a really, really good question. The DEI movement has, had some positive things that have happened, with Black Lives Matter. And I wasn't here during that time at the foundation, but I do understand, that was an opportunity for people who were interested in investing heavily in diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And it was something people all of a sudden got interested in and wanted to contribute to. Then all of a sudden it seems to have become a negative term, right? People are even kind of pivoting from using that term, but we know it's necessary. It's necessary because there needs to be a level playing field for all of us to exist in, so that folks like us who haven't had that can make some advancements, and we hope that we can get to an equitable place. Things change and they'll continue to change. Affirmative action was banned in July 2023. But I think in that instance, these students who thought that they may have a chance to get in some of these larger, very popular, predominantly white institutions, they may see a drop in admissions. Minority students, Black students may see a drop in admissions at those institutions. And it may be an opportunity for them to look at the HBCUs, our 1890 land-grant institutions, and say, hey, you know what? I ought to consider this. And it has not hurt that you got a lot of top athletes who are choosing to attend HBCUs. Many of these athletes who really weren't the predominantly white institutions, they didn't take a look at them. So they're like, you know what? I'm going to go to an HBCU. It didn't hurt that Deion Sanders, started coaching at Jackson State in Mississippi. And you had, it really, it's an opportunity in a way for people to refocus on these institutions that in the back of their mind, they know really care about them, that have really good programs and really good graduates, but they weren't thinking about them as much. So, the thing that has happened with affirmative action and some of the other policy changes could be an opportunity to turn the light for the eyes to go to our HBCUs, our 1890 land-grant institutions, and for them to be in a place where we care about them and we're willing to invest. There's probably not a faculty member or a staff member working at an 1890 land-grant HBCU who has not been mom, who has not been uncle, aunt, who has not, grabbed the student in the hall and that young man didn't have a necktie. We brought one from home. Yep. That's who we are and what we do. We care. I have had several students that I have seen them walk from undergraduate, and I help them get their PhD because we see the talent. We see that raw talent in these young people, and we believe in it, and we personally invest. That's what you get at HBCUs. That's what you get at the 1890 land-grant institutions, is that nurturing and that care and that support that's going to lead you to success.
I have one more question for you, but before I do, I want to again thank you for jumping on this podcast with me, and just I hope we can continue to connect and network with you guys, because I'm right up the street here from Delaware State University. So if awesome. I can get some conversations going with those guys and you guys to just continue to work, that would be great too. But Miss Jewel, for you, all the things that you've been through, what have you learned again about yourself mentally and spiritually?
I am at a point in my career, I've gone as high as I ever need to go. I mean, it probably, most people won't have an opportunity to be at the number 2 at one of the largest federal agencies in the government, right? I've gotten more attention than I even wanted. I've gone as high as I don't have to prove myself to myself or anyone else.
Yeah.
I'm in a place where I really want to give back. I want to see young people get to positions that I've had or higher and be comfortable in their own skin when I wasn't so much. And I'm okay with me now. And so that's the place of value that I have and that I seek. And that's what I want to do. And I have gotten to that place where I'm very comfortable with that. So I'm blessed and thankful
Yeah.
for it. And I am very happy to be in a place where if I can help someone else along, I am 100% for it.
Thank you so much for this information. You've helped me out a lot as well. And I wanna thank you and just extend my blessings to you going forward, because everything that you do has touched somebody. So continue to keep doing what you do. And again, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Brian, and thank you for being bold enough to create this platform for
Thank
folks
you.
like me to come and just talk a little bit about what I do. You're changing lives as well, so I look forward to us engaging again, and I really, really appreciate this opportunity.
You're on YouTube, baby.